Dexter Northcutt slammed his car door and trudged up the driveway, loosening his tie after another 14-hour day. At 45, he'd built Sentinel Security Solutions from nothing into a powerhouse that protected half the celebrities and corporate executives in Los Angeles. The business demanded everything from him, but that's how he preferred it. Dex never did anything halfway. The sound of excited voices drifted from the backyard of his Bel Air mansion. He checked his watch, 7:30 p.m. Chloe's birthday dinner should have ended an hour ago. His mother-in-law, Vivian Ashcroft, had insisted on hosting early since Dex probably wouldn't make it anyway. The fact that he was only 90 minutes late proved her wrong, but he doubted she'd acknowledge that. As he rounded the corner of the house, Dex stopped cold. Parked on the lawn was a gleaming red Mercedes-Benz S-Class, wrapped in an oversized bow. His 19-year-old daughter, Chloe, stood beside it, her smile tight and uncomfortable as Vivian posed for photos, one manicured hand on the hood. "There he is." Vivian's voice carried the artificial warmth she reserved for public appearances. "You've missed the entire party, Dexter, but at least you're here for the grand finale." Dex kissed Chloe's forehead. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Sorry I couldn't get away sooner." He nodded toward the car. "This is unexpected. Isn't it magnificent?" Vivian swept her arm toward the vehicle, platinum bracelets jangling. "Only the best of my granddaughter. It's the latest model, customized, of course." She handed Chloe the keys. "Don't look so shocked, Dexter. Some of us believe in being generous with family." The dig wasn't subtle. Vivian had never forgiven him for refusing financial assistance when he started his company. She'd offered a small loan of $2 million with the condition that his wife, Audrey, would manage the books. Dex had declined and built his empire his own way. "Thank you, grandmother," Chloe said, her voice oddly detached. "It's beautiful. You should be grateful," Vivian added unnecessarily, her smile tightening. Later that evening, after Vivian and the remaining guests had departed, Dex found Chloe sitting alone by the pool, still clutching the keys. "That's quite a gift," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "Planning a road trip?" Chloe's laugh held no humor. "I told grandmother I don't need another car. I love my Jeep." Yet she insisted. Dex mused. Classic Vivian. The gift is never about what you want. "Dad," Chloe hesitated. "I don't want to drive it." Dex studied his daughter's face. Though she had Audrey's delicate features, Chloe possessed his intensity and perception. Something was troubling her beyond standard teenage rebellion or distaste for her grandmother's extravagance. "What's wrong, Chloe?" She twisted the keychain around her finger. "Just a feeling." Grandmother was too insistent about this particular car. Chloe finally met his eyes. "I think there's something about it she wants me to see, or maybe you to see." A chill ran down Dex's spine. He'd built a career on recognizing threats where others saw coincidence. "Why do you think that?" She kept saying how the car was special and custom-fitted for our family. Then when she handed me the keys, she whispered, "The truth always comes out, darling." Chloe shook her head. "I'm probably overthinking it." But Dex's instincts were already firing. Vivian had never approved of him, considering him beneath her daughter's station. For years, she'd made subtle attempts to drive wedges between him and Audrey. "Where's your mother tonight?" he asked, suddenly realizing Audrey wasn't home. "Charity gala. The children's hospital thing. She left right after the party." Chloe passed him the keys. "I haven't even sat in it. Something feels off." Dex closed his fist around the keys. "Let's take a look." The Mercedes gleamed under the security lights as they approached. Dex circled it slowly, his trained eye searching for anomalies. Nothing obvious presented itself. No unusual antennas, no sign of tampering. He pressed the unlock button, and the car chirped in response. "Stay here," he told Chloe, opening the driver's side door. The new car smell hit him immediately, along with something else, Audrey's signature perfume. He slid into the leather seat, adjusting it for his frame. Everything seemed normal. Premium sound system, digital displays, luxury finishes. "Dad," Chloe called from outside. "Find anything?" "Not yet," he replied, opening the glove compartment. Registration papers, owner's manual, nothing unusual. He started the engine, and the dashboard lit up. The infotainment system activated automatically, displaying a home screen. As he reached to turn it off, a notification appeared. Continue watching? Dex froze, finger hovering over the screen. This car was brand new. There should be nothing to continue watching. He tapped the notification. The screen changed, showing a paused video. The timestamp indicated it was from 3 weeks ago. He pressed play. The interior of a hotel room came into view, one Dex recognized as part of the Beverly Wilshire. The camera angle suggested hidden surveillance. A man entered the frame, his back to the camera. Then Audrey appeared, her arms wrapping around the man. They kissed passionately before the man turned, revealing his face. Dex felt the air leave his lungs. Terrence Boyd, his oldest friend and business partner. Everything okay? Chloe called. Fine. Dex managed, quickly pausing the video. Just figuring out the system. His mind raced as pieces clicked into place. The late nights Audrey claimed were charity events. The business trips that aligned with Terrence's absences. The gradual emotional distance over the past year. Vivian hadn't given Chloe a gift. She delivered a bomb designed to detonate his marriage. But why? What could she possibly gain from exposing her own daughter's infidelity? Unless this was just the opening move in a larger game. Dex shut off the engine and pocketed the keys. As he stepped out, he forced his features into neutrality. Find anything interesting? Chloe asked. Nothing worth mentioning, he lied, placing his arm around her shoulders. But I think you're right about not driving it. Let's have it thoroughly inspected first. You can never be too careful. As they walked back to the house, Dex's mind shifted into the cold, calculated state that had kept him alive during his darkest days. Before building his security empire, he'd served in places that didn't officially exist, doing things that were never recorded. Those skills had remained dormant for years, but they hadn't disappeared. Someone had just made a critical mistake. They'd forgotten the most important fact about Dexter Northcutt. He never forgave betrayal, and he never left debts unpaid. Chapter 2. Verification. Dex waited until Chloe had gone to bed before returning to the Mercedes. With the house security system on silent mode, he slipped through the side door and crossed the lawn, a small device in his hand. The night air felt unusually cold against his skin as he unlocked the car and slid back into the driver's seat. This time, he came prepared. The device, a signal detector from his company's R&D department, would identify any surveillance equipment or transmitters. Dex methodically scanned the interior, finding nothing until he reached the rearview mirror. A faint signal pulsed on his detector. Embedded in the mirror's housing was a miniature camera, expertly installed to blend with the factory components. Professional work, he muttered, resisting the urge to disable it. Better to leave it functioning while he investigated further. Returning to the infotainment system, Dex found not just one video, but an entire collection, dozens of files spanning the past 8 months. Each thumbnail showed Audrey and Terrence in various locations. Hotels, his lake house, even the guest house on Dex's own property. The betrayal was comprehensive and methodical. He selected a video at random, watching just enough to confirm its contents before moving to another. The pattern was clear. Their affair had been ongoing and passionate. In one clip, he heard Audrey's voice clearly. Dex suspects nothing. He's too absorbed in his precious company to notice what's happening right under his nose. The irony wasn't lost on him. As a security expert, he'd protected countless clients from threats while remaining blind to the betrayal within his own home. A text message arrived from an unknown number. Illuminating evening, isn't it? Call me when you're ready to discuss implications. Vivian. Of course, she would be monitoring his discovery in real time. Rather than responding, Dex copied all the video files to his secure phone, then carefully restored the system to its original state. Tomorrow, he would begin verification, the first step in his operational planning. Dawn found him in his private office, a secure room he'd built when they purchased the house 10 years ago. The space was soundproofed, electronically shielded, and accessible only through biometric locks. Audrey had never set foot inside. Dex uploaded the videos to his private server, then initiated background processes to analyze metadata and verify authenticity. While military-grade video manipulation existed, it required resources beyond even Vivian's considerable wealth. Still, he would leave nothing to chance. His security firm employed among the best digital forensics experts in the country. Without revealing the personal nature of the content, Dex tasked his most trusted analyst with authenticating the footage. Priority verification, maximum discretion, he instructed over their secure line. I need confirmation by end of day. Understood, boss. The usual protocols, plus 2 additional authentication markers. If anyone asks, it's for the Sullivan contract. While waiting, Dex reviewed his calendar. A board meeting at 10, lunch with investors, and then a security assessment at a new client's estate. Maintaining normalcy was crucial. Any deviation from his routine would signal awareness. By evening, the results arrived, 100% authenticated. Original footage, unaltered, consistent with source timestamps. Multiple biometric confirmations. The final verification came when Dex checked the GPS tracking he'd installed on company vehicles years ago. Terrence's location history matched the timestamps and locations in the videos with disturbing precision. Just after midnight, Dex's phone rang Vivian. I assume you've confirmed everything by now, she said without preamble when he answered. A man in your position would be thorough. Why? Dex kept his voice neutral. What's your angle, Vivian? Her laugh was brittle. So direct. No wonder you've done well in business. A pause. Let's meet tomorrow. The Huntington Gardens, Japanese section, 2 p.m. Come alone, Dexter. This conversation should remain between us. Before he could respond, she hung up. Sleep evaded him as he lay in bed beside Audrey, listening to her steady breathing. Was she dreaming of Terrence? Had she ever genuinely loved him? Or had he simply been a convenient stepping stone in her social ascension? They'd met 21 years ago when Dex was transitioning from military to civilian life. Audrey, fresh from business school and working at her father's investment firm, had seemed impressed by his direct manner and ambitious plans. Their courtship had been swift, perhaps too swift, he now realized. At breakfast, Audrey moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, preparing coffee exactly as she had for 2 decades. Late night? She asked, sliding a cup toward him. I heard you in your office. New contract, he replied, watching her face for tells. High-profile client, complex security needs. You work too hard. Her hand brushed his shoulder as she passed. We barely see you anymore. The casual intimacy of her touch, knowing what those same hands had done with Terrence, made his skin crawl. But Dex maintained his composure, decades of operational discipline keeping his expression neutral. Where's Chloe this morning? Early class, then study group. Audrey checked her phone. About the hospital board meeting at 11, then lunch with Marissa. She kissed his cheek perfunctorily. Don't forget we have the Thompsons' anniversary dinner tonight. Wouldn't miss it, he lied, already knowing he would manufacture an emergency. As she left, Dex contemplated the chessboard his life had become. Audrey and Terrence were merely pieces, dangerous ones, but not the players themselves. The true opponent sat across from him, concealed in shadow. Today, he would discover Vivian's game. The Huntington Gardens sprawled over 120 acres, but the Japanese section offered particular advantages. Open sight lines, multiple exit points, and enough ambient noise from the waterfall to obscure conversation. Dex arrived 30 minutes early, scanning for surveillance or potential threats. Vivian appeared precisely at 2, elegant in a cream linen suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She carried no purse, just a small envelope. You look terrible, Dexter, she remarked, taking the seat beside him. Though I suppose that's understandable, given the circumstances. What do you want, Vivian? His voice remained steady despite the rage simmering beneath. Direct as always. She smoothed invisible wrinkles from her slacks. I want what I've always wanted, my daughter's happiness and well-being. By exposing her affair? Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. The affair is a symptom, not the disease. She placed the envelope between them. Audrey was going to leave you. She and Terrence have been planning it for months. This envelope contains their timeline, property acquisitions in the Caymans, offshore accounts, even custody arrangements for when Chloe was still a minor. Dex didn't touch the envelope. And you're sharing this out of maternal concern? I'm sharing this because their plan would destroy her. Vivian's mask slipped momentarily, revealing genuine distress. Terrence is not who she thinks he is. He's using her connection to my family and our resources. Since when do you care about my marriage, Vivian? You've spent 20 years trying to convince Audrey she married beneath her station. I care about my daughter. And despite our differences, you've been. She seemed to struggle with the admission, a stable presence in her life. More importantly, you're Chloe's father, and she adores you. Dex studied her, seeing something unexpected: fear. What aren't you telling me? Vivian glanced around before lowering her voice. Terrence approached my husband 6 months ago with an investment opportunity. Harrison was impressed enough to commit substantial capital. Last week, we discovered discrepancies, money rerouted, documents falsified. You're claiming Terrence is running a con. Dex didn't hide his skepticism. He's already wealthy from our company. Your company is successful, but not at the level he aspires to. The Ashcroft fortune, however, she let the implication hang. Have you checked your corporate accounts recently? The ones only you and Terrence can access. A cold sensation spread through Dex's chest. He hadn't personally reviewed those accounts in months, trusting their CFO's reports. I had my own investigation conducted, Vivian continued. The evidence is compelling. He's been systematically bleeding your company while setting up Audrey to take the fall if it's discovered. She pushed the envelope closer. The videos were just to get your attention. This is what you really need to see. Dex finally took the envelope, though he didn't open it. Why the elaborate setup with the car? Why not just tell me? Would you have believed me? Vivian's smile was humorless. Besides, I needed you to see for yourself, to understand the stakes. Audrey is blind where Terrence is concerned. She believes they're in love, planning a future. The truth is, once he has what he wants, she'll be discarded. And what do you get out of this arrangement with me? Protection for my family name and assets. Harrison's health is failing. His judgment has been compromised. Terrence recognized this weakness and exploited it. Vivian stood. Do what you do best, Dexter. Protect your interests. In this case, they align with mine. As she walked away, Dex remained seated, turning the envelope in his hands. If what Vivian suggested was true, the betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. Not just his marriage, but his company, his life's work, was at risk. He opened the envelope. Chapter 3. Confirmation. The documents inside the envelope painted a damning picture. Financial statements showed systematic transfers from Sentinel Securities operating accounts to shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Incorporation papers linked those companies to Terrence through a series of proxies. Most disturbing was a detailed exit strategy outlining how Terrence planned to extract maximum value from Sentinel before departing with Audrey. Dex spent the next 24 hours verifying every detail independently. He accessed bank records, reviewed security footage from their corporate headquarters, and discreetly interviewed key staff. By the following evening, he'd built an irrefutable case. Terrence had been methodically stealing from their company while seducing his wife. The betrayal cut deeper than Dex had anticipated. Terrence Boyd had been more than a business partner. He'd been Dex's closest friend for over 15 years. They'd weathered the early struggles of launching Sentinel together, celebrated every milestone, stood as best man at each other's weddings. Terrence had been godfather to Chloe. In his secure office, Dex assembled a complex timeline on his digital display. Red threads connected instances of Terrence's financial malfeasance. Blue threads tracked the progression of the affair with Audrey. Green threads identified Vivian's involvement. The pattern revealed a coordinated campaign spanning nearly 2 years, far longer than he'd initially suspected. A soft knock interrupted his concentration. "Dad," Chloe called through the door. "Are you coming out tonight? Mom says you've been in there all day." Dex quickly locked his screens before opening the door. Chloe stood in the hallway, concern evident in her expression. "Just wrapping up," he said, forcing a smile. "Everything okay? Mom's acting weird. She keeps checking her phone and making excuses to leave the room when it rings." Chloe lowered her voice. and Uncle Terrence called the house line, asking for her. He hung up when I answered. Dex's jaw tightened momentarily before he controlled his reaction. Probably business matters. Dad. Chloe's tone suggested she wasn't fooled. Does this have something to do with grandmother's car? For a brief moment, Dex considered telling her everything. Chloe was perceptive and resilient, but the weight of such knowledge would place an unfair burden on her. Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. He squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. But I might need your help with something soon. When I do, I'll need you to trust me completely. Can you do that? She studied him with eyes too wise for her 19 years. Always. That's my girl. He checked his watch. Tell your mother I'll be out in 20 minutes. After Chloe left, Dex returned to his timeline, adding one final thread, black, representing his developing response. Unlike the chaotic tangle of the other colors, this thread ran straight and true toward a single endpoint. Dinner that evening was a masterclass in deception. Dex engaged Audrey in conversation about her charity work, inquired after her friends, and presented the perfect image of an attentive husband. If she noticed anything unusual in his manner, she gave no indication. Harrison called today. Audrey mentioned as they cleared the dishes. He said you stopped by to discuss some investment opportunity? The lie came easily. Just exploring some options for diversifying Sentinel's holdings. Nothing concrete yet. He seemed surprised. Said you'd never shown interest in their financial services before. Dex shrugged casually. Times change. Business evolves. Later, after Audrey had gone to bed, Dex made a final verification call to his most trusted operative, Marius Faulkner, a former intelligence officer who now handled Sentinel's most sensitive contracts. Marius was the only person Dex trusted implicitly. Everything checks out, Marius confirmed over their encrypted line. The accounts in Grand Cayman were established 18 months ago. The property purchase in Vivian's file, it's real. Beachfront Villa, purchased through Shell Corporation 6 months ago. Deed transfers to joint ownership are ready to execute, just waiting on signatures. And the other matter? Physical surveillance confirms regular meetings at the Century Plaza Hotel. Room reserved under Campbell Holdings, paid in cash. Most recent encounter was yesterday, 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Dex absorbed this final confirmation silently. The timeline was complete, the evidence irrefutable. Audrey and Terrence had betrayed him personally and professionally, planning to abscond with millions while leaving him to face potential criminal charges for financial irregularities they had orchestrated. How do you want to proceed? Marius asked when the silence stretched. Operation Nightshade Protocol. Dex replied, invoking a contingency plan they developed years ago but never implemented. Precautionary phase begins immediately. Full activation on my command. Understood. Time frame, 48 hours to preliminary position. Execute on confirmation signal. After ending the call, Dex sat motionless in his darkened office. The rage he'd suppressed threatened to overwhelm him. He channeled it instead, focusing it like a laser on the steps required to dismantle the lives of those who had betrayed him. Throughout his military career and subsequent business success, Dex had adhered to a personal code. Loyalty above all else, betrayal met with absolute response. In the shadows of Afghanistan and other classified locations, he developed a reputation for meticulous planning and ruthless efficiency. Those who crossed him never did so twice. For 20 years, he'd buried that part of himself, become the successful businessman, devoted husband, loving father. Now the mask would come off. Dex opened his desk drawer and removed a secure phone he hadn't used in years. The battery was dead, but after charging it, the device powered on, requesting a 16-digit activation code. He entered it from memory. A simple message appeared, system active, awaiting parameters. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, Dex smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. By morning, the pieces would be in motion. Audrey and Terrence believed they had orchestrated the perfect exit strategy. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Chapter 4: Origins. The first rays of sunrise found Dex already awake, his body operating on 4 hours of sleep. the same disciplined schedule he'd maintained during his classified operations years ago. As he jogged through the quiet streets of Bel Air, memories from his past surfaced with startling clarity. Before founding Sentinel Security, before meeting Audrey, Dexter Northcutt had served in units whose existence was officially denied. His particular skills, psychological assessment, strategic planning, and unflinching execution, had made him valuable to handlers who required deniable solutions to impossible problems. Beirut, 2001. A high-value extraction gone wrong. The team compromised by an internal betrayal. Dex had been the only survivor, left for dead in an abandoned warehouse. He'd spent 3 weeks hunting down the traitor, a man he'd considered a brother, before delivering appropriate consequences. The official report listed the traitor's death as a suicide. Only Dex knew the truth. That operation had earned him both a classified commendation and a reputation. When assets went missing, contracts were broken, or loyalties questioned, Dex became the solution of last resort. Not an assassin. That was too crude a description. He was a problem solver who understood that some problems required permanent resolution. His phone vibrated with an incoming message as he rounded the corner back onto his street. Marius, Phase 1 complete. Assets secured. Awaiting further instructions. Excellent. The financial countermeasures were now in place. Emergency protocols he'd established years ago had been activated, securing Sentinel's legitimate assets and creating documentation trails that would protect the company from blowback. When he returned home, Audrey was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, her movements practiced and efficient. She wore a navy dress he recognized from previous business functions, her hair styled impeccably. Early meeting? He asked, pouring himself a glass of water. Breakfast with the hospital foundation board. She barely glanced his way. Then Terrence is picking me up. We need to review the security proposal for the Riyadh contract. The casual mention of Terrence's name, the practice lie, it struck Dex that this performance had likely played out countless times over the past year. How many meetings and proposals had been covers for their rendezvous? Sounds productive, he replied blandly. I may be late tonight. Situation developing with a Kyoto client. Her lack of interest was telling. Previously, Audrey had always asked questions about his international clients, recognizing their importance to Sentinel's portfolio. Now, she merely nodded, attention fixed on her phone. Don't wait up. He kissed her cheek perfunctorily, noting the faint scent that didn't match her usual perfume. Terrence's cologne, subtly transferred during their most recent encounter. After she left, Dex contacted Stanley Abernathy, Sentinel's corporate counsel. A former JAG officer with connections throughout federal law enforcement, Stanley had been with Dex since the company's founding. I need eyes on our Japanese subsidiaries, Dex instructed, using their established code for financial auditing. Priority Alpha. Timeline, Stanley asked, immediately understanding the severity. Yesterday. That's serious? I'll need authorization for the Berlin protocols. Granted. Dex paused. And Stan? Full quarantine procedures. No external communications. Not even a Terrence. A moment of silence followed as the implications registered. Understood. I'll have preliminary findings by end of day. The next call went to Harvey Lowell, Sentinel's head of digital security. Like many on Dex's executive team, Harvey had a background in intelligence work. In his case, NSA, cyber operations. Implementation time on Ghost Protocol? Dex asked without preamble. For the whole system, 24 hours minimum. Harvey's voice sharpened with concern. That's scorched earth, Dex. We've never activated those measures outside of simulations. Begin implementation. Authorization code Sierra Tango 778 Alpha Delta. Jesus. Harvey rarely showed surprise. That's primary override. Are we compromised? Potentially. Compartmentalize the operation. Your team gets need to know only. What about Terrence? He'll notice when his access codes stop working. Plausible deniability. System maintenance requiring credential reset. Standard procedure. Copy that. I'll monitor personally. By midday, Dex had set the professional aspects of his response in motion. Now came the personal component. He drove to an unassuming storage facility in Glendale, using a key fob registered to a name that existed only on paper. The climate-controlled unit contained artifacts from his previous life, equipment, documents, and resources that had no connection to Dexter Northcutt, devoted husband and successful entrepreneur. From a hidden compartment, he removed a case containing passport and identity documents for Nathan Ford, a corporate security consultant with impeccable credentials and a digital footprint stretching back 15 years. Nathan had never officially existed, yet his history would withstand all but the most thorough investigation. Next came financial preparations. Accounts established long ago in Liechtenstein and Singapore were accessed and activated. Unlike the transparent criminal efforts of Terrence and Audrey, these arrangements were untraceable by design, created with the assistance of individuals who specialized in complete anonymity. Dex checked his watch. By now, Terrence would be discovering the first subtle indications that something had changed. Nothing obvious, just small anomalies in system access, inexplicable delays in routine authorizations. The kind of minor frustrations that would accumulate slowly, creating uncertainty without triggering immediate alarm. His next stop was a nondescript office building in Culver City. The sixth floor housed Parallax Analytics, a data intelligence firm that officially provided background screening for corporate clients. Unofficially, it served a more selective clientele, with services bordering on gray intelligence operations. Miranda Reeves greeted him in the reception area, her professional smile never reaching her eyes. They had history, complicated, unresolved history that dated back to their shared time and operations that official records would never acknowledge. Mr. Northcutt, it's been some time. Her voice carried a hint of their shared past. 3 years, 4 months. Dex followed her to a secure conference room. I need a comprehensive package. Full spectrum. Miranda locked the door behind them. Target parameters? 2 subjects. Primary and secondary. Deep background, current activities, predictive analysis. Timeline, accelerated. 48-hour delivery. She raised an eyebrow. That carries a premium. Cost is irrelevant. Miranda studied him, recognition dawning in her eyes. This is personal. The package needs to be definitive. No ambiguities, no loose ends. Scorpion Protocol, she asked, invoking their old terminology. Dex nodded once. Full implementation. I'll handle it personally. She hesitated. Dex, once initiated, there's no recall option. I'm aware of the parameters. As he left Parallax, Dex received another message from Marius. Secondary verification complete. Timeline accelerated. Target anticipating Friday execution. Friday, just 3 days away. Apparently, Terrence and Audrey had moved up their timetable. Perhaps they'd sensed something, or maybe an opportunity had presented itself sooner than expected. Regardless, it meant Dex needed to accelerate his own plans. He called Chloe from his secure line. I need to see you. Alone. Can you meet me at Griffith Observatory in 2 hours? Dad? What's wrong? You sound strange. Nothing's wrong. I just need to discuss something important away from the house. She agreed, though her voice betrayed concern. The observatory provided an ideal meeting location, public enough for safety, with sufficient ambient noise to prevent eavesdropping. Dex arrived early, conducting a thorough security sweep before Chloe appeared. This is cryptic, even for you, she said, joining him at a viewpoint overlooking the city. Are you going to tell me what's really going on? Dex studied his daughter carefully. At 19, Chloe possessed a maturity beyond her years. She'd inherited his analytical mind and perceptiveness, combined with a moral clarity that was uniquely her own. If anyone deserved the truth, it was she. Your mother and Terrence have been having an affair, he stated plainly. It's been going on for at least 18 months. They're planning to leave together within days. Chloe's expression remained unervingly calm. I know. The simple response caught him off guard. You know, not everything but enough. I've seen the way they look at each other when they think no one's watching. The hushed phone calls, the matching business trips. She shook her head disgustedly. It's not exactly subtle if you're paying attention. Why didn't you say anything? What would it change? Would it make it hurt less? Chloe turned to face him directly. I was waiting for you to notice. You see everything in your work, but at home, The accusation stung because it contained truth. He had been absent in many ways, even when physically present. There's more, he continued. Terrence has been systematically stealing from Sentinel. They're planning to leave the country with millions, possibly as soon as Friday. This information visibly shocked her. Terrence would do that to you? After everything? People are rarely who we believe them to be. Dex's voice hardened. I'm implementing countermeasures, but I needed you to know. Things will change rapidly, and I want you insulated from the fallout. What are you planning to do? Her eyes narrowed with sudden concern. Dad, you wouldn't? You're not going to hurt them, right? The question revealed how little she knew of his true capabilities. I'm going to protect what's mine. The company, our reputation, your future. That doesn't answer my question. It's the only answer I can give right now. He placed a hand on her shoulder. I need you to trust me. When everything breaks, there will be questions, accusations. People may try to turn you against me. Remember this conversation. Chloe searched his face, perhaps looking for reassurance he couldn't honestly provide. Will I even recognize you when this is over? The question cut deeper than she could know. I've always been this person, Chloe. You've just never needed to see this side of me before. As they parted, Dex felt the weight of her unease. He'd opened a door to his true nature, a necessary risk, but one that might permanently alter their relationship. It was yet another cost of Audrey and Terrence's betrayal, another debt they would pay in full. That evening, he received the final confirmation he needed. Stanley Abernathy had uncovered incontrovertible evidence of Terrence's embezzlement. Nearly $12 million systematically siphoned from Sentinel's operational accounts into offshore holdings. Simultaneously, Harvey reported that Terrence had attempted to access secured server archives containing client data, information that would be invaluable to competitors or, more disturbingly, to certain international entities always hunting for leverage against high-profile individuals. The pieces were now in place. Tomorrow would begin the systematic dismantling of Terrence Boyd's life and ambitions. Audrey's fate remained a more complex calculation. One Dex would resolve once certain variables became clearer. He sent a single text to Marius. Activate Nightshade. Full implementation. The response came instantly. Acknowledged. 0 hour set for 0600. Dex closed his eyes, visualizing the sequence of events that would unfold with clockwork precision. By this time tomorrow, Terrence would begin to understand the true nature of the man he had betrayed. By Friday, that understanding would be complete. Sleep came easily that night, the deep, dreamless rest of a predator at peace with its nature and purpose. Chapter 5. Execution. At precisely 6 a.m., the cascade began. Terrence Boyd's morning started normally enough. He rose at his usual time, completed his customary 5-mile run, and returned to his Benedict Canyon home for a protein shake and shower. The first indication that something had changed came when he attempted to check his investment accounts on his secure tablet. Access denied. Security protocol violation. Frowning, he tried again with the same result. After 3 failed attempts, the device locked completely, displaying a message that security services had been notified of a potential breach attempt. Annoyed but not yet alarmed, Terrence switched to his phone, attempting to access Sentinel's executive server. The system prompted him for secondary authentication, unusual but not unprecedented. When he entered his biometric confirmation, however, the response changed. Credentials suspended. Please contact System Administrator. Now, genuinely concerned, he called Harvey Lowell directly. Systems undergoing emergency maintenance, Harvey explained, his voice professionally neutral. We detected anomalies in the authentication protocols overnight. As a precaution, we've suspended executive credentials pending verification. Why wasn't I notified? Terrence demanded. Standard protocol, sir. When potential system compromise is detected, communications are restricted to secure channels only. I need access restored immediately. I have the Singapore proposal due by noon. Understood. I've escalated your request to priority 1. Should be resolved within 4 hours. 4 hours? Terrence's jaw tightened imperceptibly. That's unacceptable. Override the lockout. Executive Authorization Tango, Sierra, 913. I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. The override itself has been flagged as potentially compromised. We're implementing full security protocols as outlined in Section 7B of the Emergency Response Manual. Terrence recognized the reference. He had helped write those protocols himself. They were designed for worst-case scenarios: external attack, insider threats, catastrophic system compromise. Once initiated, they couldn't be countermanded without physical authentication from both primary executives, himself and Dex, plus the head of security. "Where's Dex?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice casual. "In transit to the Tokyo office, sir. His flight departed LAX at 0400. Tokyo?" Terrence hadn't been informed of any trip to Japan. That deviation from normal procedure set off additional warning bells. He ended the call with Harvey and immediately tried Dex's personal cell, only to be directed straight to voicemail. Next, he called Audrey. "Have you spoken with Dex today?" he asked without preamble when she answered. "No, why?" Her voice sounded tense. "What's happened?" "Nothing definitive. Just unexpected system maintenance at the office." "Has he mentioned any trip to Tokyo?" A pause. "No, nothing. He was home last night, but we barely spoke. I assumed he was working late, as usual. Let me know if you hear from him." Terrence ended the call and stared at his phone thoughtfully. Something wasn't right. The system lockout, Dex's unannounced trip, the invocation of emergency protocols. Individually, each could be explained. Together, they suggested a pattern he couldn't yet decipher. He dressed quickly, selecting one of his tailored Italian suits. Whatever was happening, he would address it from the office, where he had resources and allies. As he reached for his car keys, his phone signaled an incoming email from an unfamiliar address. n.ford@parallaxanalytics.com. The subject line read simply, "Contingency activated." The message contained no text, only an attachment, a PDF titled "Confirmation of Transfer." When Terrence opened it, he found himself looking at documentation for a $50 million wire transfer from a Cayman Islands account he controlled to a numbered account in Switzerland. A transfer he had never authorized. "What the hell?" he muttered, immediately calling his private banker at Credit Suisse. "Monsieur Boyd, I was about to contact you," the banker said smoothly. "We received your transfer authorization this morning. The funds have already been processed, as requested. I never authorized any transfer. You need to reverse it immediately." "I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. The receiving institution has already acknowledged receipt and deposited the funds as per the irrevocable instruction you provided. This is unauthorized activity. My account has been compromised." "Sir, the authorization included your security phrase and dual-factor authentication. Additionally, we received verification from your registered attorney confirming the transaction was legitimate. All protocols were followed precisely." Terrence's blood ran cold. The security phrase was known only to him. The dual-factor authentication required his physical presence or someone with access to his biometric data. "Who is the receiving party?" he demanded. "I'm not at liberty to disclose that information, Monsieur Boyd. The transaction was structured as anonymous per your explicit instructions." $50 million, nearly everything he'd accumulated from his systematic theft from Sentinel, gone. Transferred to an unknown recipient through mechanisms designed to be untraceable. As the implications sank in, Terrence's phone buzzed with a text from Audrey. Something's wrong. Credit cards declined. Bank account showing zero balance. What's happening? Before he could respond, his home security system pinged with an alert. Unauthorized access detected. The live camera feed showed 4 men in suits approaching his front door, carrying what appeared to be federal credentials. Abandoning his plan to go to the office, Terrence fled through his rear entrance, taking only his phone, passport, and an emergency cash reserve he kept in his home safe. As he slipped through his neighbor's property to a service road behind the houses, he called the one person who might provide answers, Stanley Abernathy, Sentinel's corporate counsel. "Stanley, it's Terrence. I need to speak with you immediately." "I was just about to call you," Stanley replied, his normally measured voice tense. Federal agents executed a search warrant at the office 20 minutes ago. They're seizing documents related to foreign transactions and client data transfers. What? On what grounds? The warrant cites evidence of corporate espionage, financial fraud, and potential violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Stanley paused. They're specifically targeting your communications and financial records, Terrence. This is insane. Who's coordinating our response? Dex authorized me to cooperate fully with the investigation. Internal security protocols have been implemented to protect client data and ensure operational continuity. Dex? Terrence's mind raced. He's supposedly in Tokyo. No, he's here. He's been in meetings with federal investigators since 5:30 this morning. The pieces suddenly aligned with terrifying clarity. This wasn't a system malfunction or coincidental investigation. This was coordinated, comprehensive, and precisely targeted. This was Dex. Somehow, he had discovered everything. The affair with Audrey, the financial theft, the planned escape. Worse, he had implemented countermeasures with the same methodical precision that had made Sentinel Security an industry leader. Terrence abandoned his car in a shopping center parking lot and took a rideshare to a hotel where he kept a room under an alternate identity. Once inside, he attempted to access his secondary accounts, emergency resources he'd established for worst-case scenarios. Access denied. Account suspended due to suspected fraudulent activity. One by one, every financial resource he'd established over the past 5 years became inaccessible. Credit cards declined, authentication attempts failed, security questions no longer matched. It was as if his entire financial existence was being systematically erased. His secure phone rang, a line known to only 3 people. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Who is this?" he answered cautiously. "You know exactly who this is." Dex's voice was unervingly calm. "How's your morning going, old friend?" "Dex, whatever you think is happening." "Stop." The single word, quietly delivered, cut through Terrence's practiced denial. "You're currently experiencing what military strategists call vertical escalation. Simultaneous pressure applied across multiple domains, designed to eliminate response options and force capitulation. This is insane. We can talk about this." "We are talking." Dex's tone remained conversational. "Right now, federal agents are executing search warrants at your residence, office, lake house, and the apartment you maintain under the name Thomas Blackwood. They're discovering evidence of extensive financial fraud, corporate espionage, and conspiracy." Terrence felt physically ill. The Thomas Blackwood identity was his most closely guarded secret, the foundation of his exit strategy. Simultaneously, Dex continued, "Financial holds have been placed on all your known accounts based on suspicious activity reports filed by multiple institutions. Those holds typically require 15 business days to resolve, assuming no additional flags are raised during review. You can't do this. You don't have the authority." "Authority?" A hint of amusement entered Dex's voice. "I'm not doing anything, Terrence. I'm merely observing as the consequences of your actions manifest." "The federal investigation?" "Triggered by anonymous tips, supported by documentation of your communications with certain foreign entities interested in our client data." "That's a fabrication." "I never." "The financial irregularities?" "Discovered during a routine audit initiated after discrepancies were noted in quarterly reports." "The blocked accounts?" "Standard fraud prevention measures implemented by institutions when unusual transaction patterns are detected." Terrence struggled to formulate a response, his mind racing through potential counter-moves. Each path forward seemed blocked before he could even begin. "Why?" he finally managed. "An interesting question from the man who spent 18 months sleeping with my wife while systematically stealing from our company." Dex's voice hardened slightly. "But perhaps you're asking about methodology rather than motivation. In that case, the answer is simpler. I'm better at this than you are. I always have been. What do you want? Money? I can get it back. More than what I took. Double it. I don't want anything from you, Terrence. That's what you're failing to understand. This isn't negotiation or leverage play. This is conclusion." The line went dead, leaving Terrence staring at his phone in stunned silence. For the first time, he felt genuine fear, not just for his freedom or finances, but for his life. The methodical precision of what was happening suggested capabilities beyond what he believed Dex possessed. His phone buzzed with an incoming text from Audrey, federal agents of the House. They're taking computers, files. They showed me surveillance photos of us together. Dex knows everything. Before he could respond, another message followed. They have evidence you've been selling client information. They're saying I could be charged as an accessory. What have you done? Terrence began typing a response, only to be interrupted by an incoming call from an unlisted number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Mr. Boyd. The voice was professionally detached. This is Special Agent Connor with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We need to speak with you regarding certain transactions associated with Sentinel Security Solutions. Would you be willing to come in voluntarily, or should we proceed with the arrest warrant? Arrest warrant? On what charges? Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, and violations of the Economic Espionage Act to start. We're adding charges as additional evidence is processed. I want my attorney present. Of course. Though you should know that Mr. Abernathy has recused himself, citing conflict of interest as he represents Sentinel Security corporately. We can provide a list of qualified counsel if needed. Terrence ended the call, his hands shaking slightly. Stanley's recusal eliminated another potential resource. The walls were closing in with terrifying speed. His final desperate move was to contact Harrison Ashcroft, Audrey's father and a man of considerable influence in financial and political circles. If anyone could intervene effectively, it would be Harrison. The call connected, but the voice that answered was not Harrison's. Hello, Terrence. Vivian Ashcroft's cultured tones carried unmistakable satisfaction. Harrison isn't available to speak with you. Not today, not ever again. Vivian, please. There's been a misunderstanding. Has there? I find the situation remarkably clear. You attempted to manipulate my daughter, steal from her husband's company, and exploit my husband's declining health to access our family resources. Now you're experiencing consequences. I can explain everything if you will just listen. I've heard enough of your explanations. So has Harrison. So has Audrey. Vivian's voice hardened. You should have researched Dexter more thoroughly before you targeted his family. His business success isn't nearly the most interesting aspect of his background. The call disconnected, leaving Terrence with a growing sense of doom. Somehow, Vivian was involved in whatever Dex had set in motion, an alliance he would never have anticipated. With his options rapidly diminishing, Terrence made a final desperate move. He had maintained one last emergency resource, a private aircraft on standby at a small airfield in Van Nuys, registered to a shell corporation with no apparent connection to him. If he could reach it, there might still be a path to escape. He abandoned the hotel room, leaving everything except his passport and the cash he carried. Using a series of rideshares and public transportation to avoid tracking, he made his way toward Van Nuys. As his final rideshare approached the airfield, Terrence felt a flicker of hope. The plane, a Gulfstream G550 with range sufficient to reach several non-extradition countries, represented his last chance at freedom. That hope died as they rounded the final corner. The airfield access road was blocked by multiple law enforcement vehicles. Even from a distance, he could see officers surrounding his aircraft, which sat with its cabin door open and stairs extended. Change of plans, he told the driver, redirecting to a nearby hotel. Once in a new room, Terrence collapsed onto the bed, the full weight of his situation finally overwhelming him. In less than 12 hours, his carefully constructed exit strategy had been completely dismantled. His financial resources were frozen or gone. Federal investigations targeted him specifically, with evidence apparently substantial enough for immediate action. Every contingency plan had been anticipated and neutralized before he could implement it. His phone buzzed with a final text message from an unknown number. You have 24 hours to surrender yourself to federal authorities. After that, additional evidence regarding certain international transactions will be provided to specific agencies. Choose wisely. No signature was necessary. The methodical, comprehensive nature of his destruction carried Dexter Northcutt's unmistakable signature. For the first time in his adult life, Terrence Boyd had no move left to make. Chapter 6. Revelation. While Terrence's world collapsed around him, Audrey Northcutt faced her own reckoning. Federal agents had arrived at the Bel Air mansion shortly after 8 a.m., presenting a search warrant with clinical efficiency. They'd been respectful but thorough, collecting computers, phones, documents, and digital storage devices. More disturbing than the search itself was the evidence they referenced. Surveillance photos showing her with Terrence in various intimate situations, hotel receipts, transcripts of calls. Mrs. Northcutt, the lead agent, had explained, "We're investigating Mr. Boyd for various financial crimes and potential espionage activities. Any information you can provide voluntarily would be helpful to our investigation and potentially beneficial to your own situation." "My situation?" she'd asked, fighting to maintain composure. "Evidence suggests you may have had knowledge of or involvement in Mr. Boyd's activities. Cooperation at this stage would be looked upon favorably." She declined to answer questions without legal representation, a decision the agents accepted without apparent concern. After they departed, Audrey found herself alone in the suddenly unfamiliar house, struggling to process what was happening. Dex knew everything. The realization carried a coldness that settled in her chest like ice. Somehow, he had discovered the affair and Terrence's financial maneuvers. Worse, he had apparently been gathering evidence for some time, methodically, silently, while she believed herself undetected. Her phone rang, displaying her mother's number. "What have you done?" Vivian demanded without preamble. "Mother, I can't talk right now. There's a situation." "Yes, I'm perfectly aware of this situation. Federal agents have been questioning your father about his investments with Terrence Boyd. They have documentation suggesting Harrison knowingly participated in fraud." "That's ridiculous. Dad would never." "Of course he wouldn't," Vivian snapped. "But his declining cognitive function made him vulnerable to manipulation. Something you might have noticed had you not been so preoccupied with your affair." Audrey felt as if she'd been physically struck. "You knew. For months. Unlike your husband, I chose not to intervene immediately. I want to see how far you would take this indiscretion." Vivian's voice dripped with disappointment. "Apparently, quite far indeed. Mother, please. I need help. I need to understand what's happening." "What's happening is that your husband discovered your betrayal and responded accordingly. Surely you didn't believe Dexter, a man who built a security empire from nothing, would simply accept such treatment. He wouldn't involve federal authorities over a personal matter. That's not how Dex operates." Vivian's laugh was cold. "You never really knew him, did you? Your father, and I tried to warn you when you first brought him home. A man with his background doesn't simply forget his capabilities when they become inconvenient." "What background? What are you talking about?" "Before Dexter Northcutt became a successful security entrepreneur, he served in units that officially didn't exist, doing things his country needed but couldn't acknowledge. Your father made discreet inquiries back then, professional courtesy to ensure his daughter wasn't marrying someone truly unsuitable." Audrey struggled to reconcile this information with the man she'd lived with for 20 years. "That doesn't make sense. Dex was military intelligence. He analyzed data, created security protocols. That was one aspect of his service, certainly." Vivian sighed. "The point is, you and Terrence catastrophically underestimated the man you betrayed. Now you're experiencing the consequences. I need to speak with him." "Explain." "Explain what exactly?" "That sleeping with his best friend and planning to abscond with millions from his company was somehow justifiable." Vivian's tone sharpened. "You made your choices, Audrey. Now face them with at least a modicum of dignity." After the call ended, Audrey sat motionless, her mother's words echoing. The Dex she knew was methodical and reserved, certainly, but not the calculating operative Vivian had described. Yet the precision of what was happening, the federal investigation, the targeted evidence, the systematic dismantling of Terrence's resources suggested capabilities beyond what she believed her husband possessed. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Chloe standing in the hallway, her expression unreadable. "The federal agents are gone?" Chloe asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Yes, for now. Audrey studied her daughter, wondering how much she knew or suspected. It's a misunderstanding. Nothing for you to worry about. Is that what you call it? A misunderstanding? Chloe's voice carried an edge Audrey had never heard before. I saw the surveillance photos they showed you. That looked pretty clear to me. The floor seemed to shift beneath Audrey's feet. You knew. Not everything, but enough. Chloe's gaze was unflinching. I've watched you lie to Dad for months. Seen how you look at Uncle Terrence when you think no one's watching. Noticed the matching business trips and hush phone calls. Chloe, you don't understand. Don't. The single word cut through Audrey's justification. Don't tell me I don't understand. I understand perfectly. You were unhappy, so you cheated. You wanted something different, so you planned to steal from Dad and leave. It wasn't like that. Terrence and we connected in a way your father and I never did. Dex was always absent, physically present, but emotionally unavailable. Always focused on the company, on clients, on building his empire. So that justifies betraying him? Taking what he built? Chloe shook her head in disgust. You could have left honestly, asked for a divorce, divided assets legally. Instead, you chose this. The condemnation in her daughter's eyes was unbearable. You're too young to understand the complexities of adult relationships. I'm old enough to recognize selfishness and cowardice. Chloe moved toward the door. Dad knows everything, by the way. Has for some time. He wanted me insulated from the fallout, but I deserve to know what was happening to my family. He told you. Audrey felt a fresh wave of betrayal. When? Does it matter? The point is, he was honest with me. Something you might try sometime. After Chloe left, Audrey attempted to contact Terrence again, but her calls went straight to voicemail. Her text messages remained unanswered. The isolation felt deliberate and absolute, as if an invisible barrier had been erected around her, cutting off all potential support. Her attorney finally returned her calls late that afternoon, his normally confident demeanor notably subdued. The situation is serious, Audrey, he explained. Federal investigators have documentation suggesting you had knowledge of Mr. Boyd's financial activities. There are recorded conversations where you discuss using Sentinel's resources and client information. Those were theoretical discussions. We were exploring possibilities, not implementing plans. Intent can be established through pattern and preparation. The evidence I've seen so far suggests both. He paused. There's also the matter of the offshore accounts. Your signature appears on several of the controlling documents. Terrence told me those were legitimate investment vehicles for our future together. A future funded by systematically misappropriated assets. The attorney sighed heavily. I need to be clear with you. The evidence is substantial and specific. They're building a case that could potentially result in significant charges against both you and Mr. Boyd. What about Dex? He must be behind this. Mr. Northcutt appears to be cooperating fully with investigators. From what I can gather, he was unaware of these activities until recently and immediately reported his concerns to appropriate authorities. The narrative was taking shape with terrifying clarity. Dex wasn't just exposing their affair. He was positioning himself as the victimized party, the responsible corporate leader who discovered wrongdoing and properly reported it. Meanwhile, she and Terrence were being cast as conspirators who had betrayed both personal and professional trust. It was, Audrey had to admit, masterfully executed. By evening, her isolation felt complete. Calls to friends went unanswered or met with awkward excuses. Her parents were unavailable. Even her sister responded with uncharacteristic brevity, suggesting they talk when things settle down. The house, normally filled with staff and activity, stood empty and silent. The security system operated automatically, but the personnel who typically monitored the property were conspicuously absent. At 8 p.m. precisely, her phone rang, a blocked number. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "We need to talk." Dex's voice was calm and measured, betraying no emotion. "Where are you? What's happening?" "I'm where I need to be, doing what needs to be done." A pause. "You should know that Terrence is considering a plea arrangement with federal prosecutors. His cooperation would significantly impact the case against any associated parties. The implication was clear. Terrence might save himself by incriminating her more deeply. This is insane, Dex. Whatever you think happened. I don't think anything happened, Audrey. I know precisely what happened, when it happened, and how it happened. I have documentation of every meeting, every conversation, every financial transaction. The only variable remaining is your response to the inevitable. What do you want from me? She asked, hearing the desperation in her own voice. Practical efficiency, a clean resolution. His tone remained clinically detached. You have 3 options. First, you can maintain your current course, denying everything despite overwhelming evidence. That path ends with federal charges, public trial, and likely incarceration. Audrey felt physically ill at the prospect. Second, Dex continued, you can attempt to negotiate with prosecutors independently, potentially securing more favorable terms by providing evidence against Terrence. A betrayal to save yourself from the consequences of betrayal. Fitting in its way. And the third option, you sign the documents being delivered to you within the hour. Complete dissolution of our marriage, with terms that are fair but not generous. You retain enough to rebuild a life elsewhere, without the Northcutt name or access to family resources. You provide a signed affidavit acknowledging your role in the financial activities under investigation, to be held in escrow by a neutral third party. Why would I sign a confession? Not a confession, a form of insurance. If you accept the divorce terms and relocate as specified, the affidavit remains sealed. Should you attempt to challenge the agreement later or make any public statements regarding these matters, it would be released to appropriate authorities. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering a controlled exit from a situation of your creation. Dex's voice finally revealed a hint of emotion. Not anger, but something closer to exhaustion. Consider it carefully, Audrey. This offer expires at midnight. After he disconnected, Audrey sat motionless, considering her limited options. Precisely 1 hour later, a courier arrived with a package containing divorce papers, financial agreements, and the affidavit Dex had described. The terms were exactly as promised. Not punitive, but structured to ensure her complete separation from the life she'd known. As midnight approached, she signed every document, her signature growing progressively less steady with each page. The courier waited patiently, checking each signature against a reference example, before resealing the completed documents in his secure case. Final confirmation is required, he stated, presenting a tablet displaying a simple message. I accept these terms freely and without coercion, understanding they represent full and final resolution of all matters between myself and Dexter Northcutt. Below was a space for her thumbprint, biometric confirmation of her agreement, impossible to later claim was forged or obtained under duress. Audrey pressed her thumb to the screen, feeling the subtle vibration as the device recorded her print. With that simple action, 20 years of marriage ended not with confrontation or emotion, but with efficient, calculated finality. The courier departed without another word, leaving Audrey alone in the suddenly alien house that had been her home for the past decade. Her phone buzzed with a text message from another unknown number. Car will arrive at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Pack only personal items. Everything else has been arranged at your destination. This concludes our business. No signature was necessary. The message, like everything else about the past 24 hours, carried Dexter Northcutt's unmistakable efficiency. For the first time since the nightmare began, Audrey allowed herself to fully comprehend what had happened. Not just the collapse of her plans with Terrence, but the revelation of who her husband truly was. For 20 years, she had lived with a man capable of this level of calculated response, never recognizing the precision instrument beneath the successful businessman's exterior. The realization carried a chill that no amount of rationalization could dispel. Chapter 7. Accountability. 3 days after Terrence Boyd surrendered to federal authorities, Dex sat across from Special Agent Melissa Donovan in a discreet conference room at the federal building in Westwood. The location had been chosen for its privacy, away from both the FBI's primary offices and Sentinel Security's headquarters. Everything is progressing as anticipated, Agent Donovan confirmed, sliding a folder across the table. Boyd has been remarkably cooperative once he understood the extent of the evidence against him. Dex reviewed the documents inside. Summaries of Terrence's statements, confirmation of financial recoveries, status reports on the ongoing investigation. The federal response had been exactly as Marius had predicted when they initiated contact through back channels. And the international components? Dex asked, closing the folder. Contained, for now. Your information regarding the attempted data transfers was instrumental in preventing serious compromise. Several of your clients have expressed their gratitude, discreetly, of course. What remained unspoken was the true nature of those clients. Individuals and organizations whose data would have created significant national security concerns had it been compromised. Sentinel Security protected not just celebrities and corporate executives, but also assets whose connections to government agencies were deliberately obscured. The arrangement stands, as discussed. Dex confirmed. Agent Donovan nodded. Boyd faces substantial charges, but his cooperation reduces his exposure somewhat. 10 to 15 years, minimum security, with the possibility of earlier release, depending on continued cooperation. The focused prosecution keeps certain sensitive matters out of public record. And my former wife? No charges at present. The evidence suggests knowledge, but limited direct involvement in the financial aspects. Should she maintain the agreed-upon parameters, that status is unlikely to change. It was the outcome Dex had engineered, justice delivered in measured doses, with controlled collateral damage and minimal exposure for innocent third parties. Sentinel Security would survive with its reputation intact, its clients protected from both financial and information security breaches. After concluding the meeting, Dex drove to a small cafe in Venice Beach, where Chloe waited at an outdoor table overlooking the water. She looked up as he approached, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. "Everything resolved?" she asked as he sat opposite her. "Substantially," he confirmed. "Terrence will face consequences proportionate to his actions. Your mother has relocated to the Connecticut property. The company is secure." Chloe studied him thoughtfully. "And you? How are you processing all this?" It was a perceptive question, one that acknowledged the personal impact behind the methodical response. For all his operational discipline, Dex remained human, with human reactions to profound betrayal. "I'm adjusting to revised parameters," he answered honestly. 20 years of shared history doesn't disappear overnight, regardless of how it ended. "Do you regret how you handled it?" Her direct gaze challenged him to equal honesty. Dex considered the question carefully. "I regret the necessity, not the execution. Once certain facts were established, options became limited. I chose the path that protected what matters most." "The company?" Chloe pressed. "You." His response came without hesitation. "Your future, your well-being, your freedom from their poor decisions. Everything else was secondary." Something in Chloe's expression softened slightly. "Grandmother says you were always dangerous, just well concealed. Though we never really knew you. Vivian has her own perspective, shaped by her priorities." Dex leaned forward slightly. "But you've always known me, Chloe. I've never pretended to be something I'm not. Simply kept certain capabilities private until circumstances required them. The military background Mother mentioned is part of my history, yes. Before Sentinel, I served in specialized units. The work required particular skills and perspectives. Skills like systematically dismantling someone's entire life in 24 hours. There was no judgment in her tone, only a desire to understand. Among others, Dex met her gaze directly. "I built Sentinel Security to protect people from threats they often don't recognize until it's too late. Sometimes that protection requires preemptive action." Chloe was silent for a long moment, processing his words. "Will I see Mom again?" "That's entirely your decision. The arrangements with your mother don't restrict your communication or relationship with her. They simply establish necessary boundaries between her actions and our lives moving forward. And if I want to understand more about who you really are, the parts you kept private all these years." It was a fair question, one that acknowledged the revelation of capabilities that had remained hidden throughout her childhood. Dex had always compartmentalized his past, separating the specialized operative from the businessman and father. Recent events had forced those compartments open. "Ask what you want to know," he replied simply. "I'll answer what I can." Their conversation continued as afternoon faded into evening, covering territory they had never explored before. Dex shared carefully selected aspects of his military service, the transition to civilian life, and the founding principles behind Sentinel security. Chloe listened attentively, asking insightful questions that revealed her own analytical mind. By the time they parted, something had shifted between them. Not a complete resolution, but a foundation for moving forward with greater understanding. The following morning, Dex met with Marius at a secure location in Pasadena. The converted warehouse served as Sentinel's secondary operations center, unknown to most employees and completely unconnected to their official facilities. "Final cleanups are complete," Marius reported, displaying various tracking metrics on secure monitors. "All surveillance has been removed, communication traces eliminated, financial pathways dissolved. Operationally, we're at zero footprint. And the Nathan Ford identity? Deactivated and archived. All associated resources have been returned to dormant status." Dex nodded approvingly. The operational discipline had been flawless, precision implementation followed by methodical deactivation, leaving no evidence of methods or means. "The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow," Marius continued. "Appointment of interim leadership for Terrence's divisions, public statement regarding his departure, reassurance to key clients. Transparency within appropriate boundaries," Dex confirmed. "We acknowledge the situation without compromising ongoing legal proceedings or client confidentiality." "And personally?" Marius asked, his tone shifting slightly. As Dex's longest-serving associate, he was one of the few people permitted to ask such questions. "Functional," Dex replied honestly, "adjusting to revised circumstances." 20 years is a long time to discover you never really knew someone. Marius spoke from experience, having been through his own personal betrayals years earlier. The operational response was necessary and appropriate. The personal processing takes longer. "One step at a time," Dex acknowledged. "For now, we secure what remains and rebuild where necessary." That evening, Dex returned to the Bel Air house for the first time since implementing the operation against Terrence and Audrey. The property felt different now, emptier despite being structurally unchanged. He walked through each room methodically, noting the subtle absences where Audrey's personal items had been removed. In his secure office, he reviewed final confirmations. Audrey had arrived at the Connecticut property as scheduled. Terrence remained in federal custody, his cooperation ensuring the investigation remained focused and controlled. Sentinel Security stock had dipped briefly when news of executive transitions broke, but had already stabilized as client confidence remained strong. A message from Vivian Ashcroft appeared on his secure line. Arrangement satisfactory. Harrison's condition stabilized. Mutual interest preserved. Their unlikely alliance had served its purpose. Vivian had provided the initial information that triggered his investigation. He had ensured her family's financial interests were protected from Terrence's manipulations. That their cooperation had also served justice was a secondary benefit. As midnight approached, Dex stood on the terrace overlooking the city lights of Los Angeles. 20 years of marriage had ended not with dramatic confrontation, but with methodical resolution. The betrayal had been addressed, not through emotional reaction, but calculated response. Some might view his actions as cold or excessive. Those people, he reflected, had never truly understood the fundamental principle that had guided his life. Loyalty was sacred, betrayal unforgivable. Those who violated that principle faced consequences proportionate to their actions. His phone signaled an incoming call. "Chloe, everything okay?" he asked, aware that she rarely called this late. "Just checking in," she replied, her voice suggesting she was still processing recent events. "It's weird not having Mom here, even knowing what happened." "Adjustment takes time," he acknowledged. "For all of us. I was thinking about what you said earlier, about protecting what matters most." She paused, Thank you for making sure I wasn't collateral damage in all this. You never were, Dex assured her. Every decision, every action was designed with your well-being as a primary consideration. After they disconnected, Dex remained on the terrace, contemplating the path forward. The operational phase had concluded successfully. Now began the harder work, rebuilding what remained, establishing new patterns, moving forward with revised parameters. He had faced similar challenges before, in other contexts and circumstances. The methodology remained consistent. Assess the situation objectively, identify available resources, implement strategic response, adapt as necessary. One step at a time, one day at a time, moving forward with purpose and precision. It was, after all, what he did best. Chapter 8, Fallout. 6 weeks after Terrence Boyd entered his guilty plea, the business world had largely moved on to newer scandals and controversies. Sentinel Security had weathered the initial turbulence, emerging with reputation intact and client confidence restored. The official narrative, a trusted executive gone rogue, discovered and reported by vigilant leadership, had been accepted without significant challenge. For Dex, however, the process of reconstruction continued methodically. The professional aspects had been straightforward: restructuring Terrence's former divisions, reassigning responsibilities, implementing enhanced oversight protocols. The personal dimensions proved more complex. On a rainy Tuesday morning, he sat across from Dr. Andrea Morrison in her discreet office overlooking Century City. Their weekly sessions had begun at Chloe's insistence 3 weeks earlier. "I'm still not convinced this is necessary," Dex noted, glancing at the rain-streaked windows. "Yet you continue to attend," Dr. Morrison observed, her expression neutral but attentive. "Why is that?" "I made a commitment to my daughter, and that commitment outweighs your discomfort with the process." It wasn't a question, but Dex nodded confirmation anyway. Operational discipline includes following through on commitments, regardless of personal preference. "You continue to frame personal experiences in operational terminology," she noted. "Is that a conscious choice?" The question caught him slightly off guard. "It's a matter of precision. Appropriate terminology clarifies thought processes. It also creates distance," Dr. Morrison suggested, "between yourself and the emotional components of recent events." Dex considered this perspective. Distance provides clarity. Clarity enables effective response. At what cost to your own processing? Processing occurs regardless of terminology. The framework simply provides structure. Dr. Morrison adjusted her approach slightly. "Tell me about Audrey. Not the betrayal or its resolution, but who she was to you during your 20 years together." The redirect was unexpected. Dex had prepared extensively for questions about his response to the betrayal, his military background, the methodical dismantling of Terrence's life. He hadn't anticipated being asked to examine the relationship itself. He began, then paused, searching for appropriate descriptors. Intelligent, socially adept, an effective partner for navigating certain environments. Those sound like qualifications for a position, not descriptions of a life partner. The observation struck closer than Dex would have preferred. Our relationship served mutual objectives. She gained financial security and social advancement beyond her family's already substantial position. I gained access to networks and environments that facilitated business development. And emotionally, Dex's instinct was to deflect, but something in Dr. Morrison's steady gaze suggested that evasion would be recognized and noted. There was genuine connection initially. Shared goals, compatible perspectives. Over time, divergence occurred. When did you first notice this divergence? Approximately 7 years ago. Chloe was entering adolescence. Audrey became increasingly focused on social positioning, charitable board memberships, activities that enhanced visibility within certain circles. While you remained focused on building Sentinel Security, the company required significant attention to achieve established objectives. Dr. Morrison made a note before continuing. "Do you believe Audrey's affair with Terrence was primarily about emotional connection or strategic advancement?" The question forced Dex to consider motivations he'd previously analyzed only from an operational perspective. Both, though proportions shifted over time. Initial attraction based on perceived emotional availability. Terrence's carefully cultivated persona as the charming, attentive counterpoint to my more reserved demeanor. And later, strategic considerations became dominant once Terrence identified Audrey as a pathway to greater resources. The Ashcroft family wealth exceeded what he could extract from Sentinel alone. You speak about this analysis with remarkable detachment. Dex noted the subtle shift in her tone. Is emotional reactivity preferable? Would anger or jealousy provide better insights? Not necessarily better, but different. You responded to profound personal betrayal with tactical precision rather than emotional reaction. That's unusual, even for someone with your background. Emotional responses rarely improve outcomes, Dex stated simply. Tactical precision delivered justice while minimizing collateral damage. Dr. Morrison shifted direction again. Tell me about your relationship with Chloe now, post-resolution. Evolving, Dex replied, feeling on firmer ground with this topic. She's processing revised understanding of both parents, reconciling previous perceptions with new information. In your revelation that her father possesses capabilities beyond what she'd previously known, that aspect has been, he searched for the precise term, surprisingly straightforward. Chloe has always recognized certain aspects of my approach to problems. The recent events simply provided context for patterns she'd already observed. Is she in contact with Audrey? Limited communication. Weekly calls primarily. Chloe maintains appropriate boundaries while preserving the relationship. On your advice? By her choice. I've placed no restrictions on their interaction. Dr. Morrison studied him thoughtfully. Many men in your position would have attempted to damage that relationship, encourage their child to choose sides. Counterproductive, Dex responded. Chloe's well-being remains the priority. Forcing artificial choices would create unnecessary stress and potential resentment. She's capable of forming her own assessments based on available information. As their session concluded, Dr. Morrison offered a final observation. You've applied exceptional discipline to managing the external consequences of these events. The internal processing may require different strategies than those that served you operationally. Dex considered her words as he drove back to Sentinel's headquarters through the rain-slick streets. Internal processing had never been his primary focus. Results mattered more than reactions, outcomes more than emotions. Yet he recognized the validity of her perspective. Some aspects of recent events remained unresolved, despite the external resolution. At the office, Miranda Reeves waited in his private conference room, her presence unexpected but not unwelcome. Their complicated history provided context that few others possessed regarding his true capabilities. Final verification complete, she reported without preamble. All operational elements have been confirmed dormant. No active surveillance. No residual monitoring. Clean termination across all platforms. Thorough as always, Dex acknowledged. Thank you. Miranda studied him with the perceptiveness that had made her exceptional in their shared past. Personal status? The simple question from someone who understood its full implications deserved an honest response. Functional. Adapting to revised parameters. The dormancy period, how's that processing? She referred to the transition they both understood from experience. The period after an operation concluded, when capabilities developed for specific purposes required recontainment. The calculated precision, situational awareness, and ruthless efficiency that served operationally needed careful management in civilian contexts. Managed, Dex replied. Compartmentalization remains effective. Until it isn't, Miranda noted, speaking from personal experience. The bleed-through happens eventually. Better to acknowledge and address it proactively. Her insight came from shared history. They had both served in environments that developed specialized capabilities, then transitioned to civilian lives that required careful management of those same skills. Miranda had experienced her own challenges with that transition years earlier. Noted, Dex acknowledged. Appropriate measures are being implemented. including the therapeutic intervention. She gestured toward the visitor badge still visible on his jacket, identifiable to her trained eye as coming from the medical building where Dr. Morrison maintained her practice. At Chloe's insistence, yes. Miranda's smile held genuine warmth. Good. External accountability provides structural support during transition phases. I'm glad you have that resource. After she departed, Dex spent the remainder of the day addressing operational matters at Sentinel. The company had emerged from recent events stronger in many respects. Vulnerabilities identified, security protocols enhanced, leadership streamlined. The board had expressed unanimous confidence in his continuing direction, impressed by the decisive handling of Terrence's betrayal. That evening, he met Chloe for dinner at a quiet restaurant in Malibu, far from their usual haunts in the city. Their weekly dinners had become an important ritual during the adjustment period, providing structured opportunity for necessary conversations. "How was today's session?" she asked directly once they were seated. "Productive," Dex replied, appreciating her straightforwardness. "Dr. Morrison has insightful perspectives." Translation: she asked uncomfortable questions you'd rather avoid. Chloe's smile softened the observation. "But you went anyway. I made a commitment." "To me," she acknowledged. "But eventually, it needs to be for yourself, too." Her perception reminded Dex again of how much his daughter had matured through recent events. At 19, she demonstrated clarity and resilience beyond her years. "I spoke with Mom yesterday," Chloe continued after their orders were placed. "She's starting therapy, too." Dex nodded acknowledgement without commenting directly. Audrey's process remained her own, separate from his concerns, except where it impacted Chloe. "She asked about you. How you're doing." This was unexpected. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're focused on moving forward, on making sure Sentinel recovers completely, on making sure I'm okay." Chloe hesitated before adding, "And that you never mention her name unless I bring her up first." The observation was accurate. Dex had maintained strict discipline regarding references to Audrey, allowing Chloe to control when and how her mother entered their conversations. "She's lonely," Chloe continued. "The Connecticut house is beautiful but isolated. Most of her social circle has quietly distanced themselves since everything happened." "Natural consequences," Dex noted dispassionately. "Social structures often realign when status changes." "You don't seem particularly satisfied by that." He considered her observation carefully. "Satisfaction isn't the objective. Resolution was achieved through appropriate measures. Subsequent consequences follow naturally from those actions." "Always so clinical." Chloe shook her head slightly. "Do you ever just feel angry about what happened? Hurt? Betrayed?" The questions mirrored those Dr. Morrison had posed earlier. "Emotional responses occur," Dex acknowledged. "They're simply not permitted to drive decision-making or subsequent actions." "That sounds exhausting," Chloe commented. "Constantly monitoring and containing your own reactions. It becomes habitual with sufficient practice." "Is that from your military training?" "The ability to compartmentalize everything so completely." Dex weighed his response carefully. Chloe deserved honesty, but certain aspects of his past remained classified despite the years that had passed. Partially, the work required separation between operational necessities and personal reactions. That discipline transferred effectively to civilian contexts. Their conversation shifted to lighter topics through dinner, but as they walked along the beach afterward, Chloe returned to more substantive matters. "Grandmother called yesterday. She wanted to make sure I understood her role in everything that happened." Dex maintained neutral expression despite his surprise. "What did she share?" "That she discovered what Mom and Terrence were planning. That she came to you with evidence rather than confronting Mom directly." Chloe glanced sideways at him. "That you two formed an unlikely alliance to protect family interests on both sides." "An accurate summary," Dex confirmed. "Vivian recognized the threat to multiple equities and took appropriate action. She also said something interesting, that she'd misjudged you from the beginning. That she'd focused on your background rather than your character." Chloe watched the waves for a moment before continuing. "She actually apologized in her way. Said she'd been wrong about what kind of man you are." This was genuinely unexpected. Vivian Ashcroft had spent 20 years maintaining subtle but consistent disapproval of her daughter's choice of husband. That she would acknowledge error, even indirectly, represented significant shift. People's assessments evolve with new information. Dex observed neutrally. Including yours? Chloe pressed. About Mom. The question demanded careful consideration. Your mother made choices I couldn't anticipate based on my understanding of her character and our shared history. That requires reevaluation of previous assessments. But not forgiveness, Chloe noted, making it half statement, half question. Forgiveness suggests emotional resolution, Dex explained. I've achieved practical resolution through appropriate countermeasures. The emotional component remains in process. They walked in silence for several minutes before Chloe spoke again. I'm worried about you, Dad. Not professionally. Sentinel is thriving, and you've handled everything with your usual precision. I'm worried about you personally. About what happens when all the practical matters are resolved, and you're left with just the emotional residue. Her concern touched him more deeply than he'd expected. I appreciate that, but it's unnecessary. Adaptation to changing circumstances is a core competency. There you go again, clinical terminology for deeply personal experience. She stopped walking and turned to face him directly. Promise me something? If possible. Promise you won't just bury all this under work and discipline and operational parameters. That you'll actually process what happened, not just manage its consequences. The request was reasonable, if challenging. I'll continue the therapeutic intervention as agreed, he offered, and acknowledge the value of addressing emotional components alongside practical resolution. Chloe smiled slightly. That's probably the closest to a normal human response I'm going to get, isn't it? For now, Dex conceded, returning her smile with a small one of his own. As they drove back toward the city, Dex reflected on their conversation. Chloe's concern was valid. His habitual response to challenging situations had always been to focus on resolution rather than reaction, on addressing problems rather than processing emotions. That approach had served him effectively throughout his career, both military and civilian. Yet recent events had created circumstances beyond standard operational parameters. The betrayal by his wife of 20 years and his closest friend had breached compartments he'd maintained carefully throughout his adult life. The response had required capabilities he'd kept dormant for decades. Now, with external resolution achieved, the internal recalibration presented different challenges, ones that perhaps required different approaches than those that had served him in the past. It was, he acknowledged silently, a matter deserving further consideration. Chapter 9. Aftermath. 6 months after Terrence Boyd began serving his 12-year sentence at a minimum security federal facility in Lompoc, life had established new patterns and rhythms. Sentinel Security had not only recovered from the crisis but emerged stronger, with enhanced protocols and expanded client relationships. The business world had largely forgotten the specifics of the scandal, attention shifting to newer controversies and developments. For Dex, the professional resolution had been comprehensive and satisfying. The personal dimensions continued to evolve in less predictable ways. On a clear autumn morning, he sat across from Vivian Ashcroft on the terrace of her Montecito estate. Their quarterly meetings had become an unexpected but consistent feature of the new normal. Pragmatic alliance transformed into something approaching mutual respect. Harrison's neurologist is cautiously optimistic, Vivian reported, referring to her husband's ongoing treatment for cognitive decline. The experimental protocol appears to be slowing progression significantly. Good news, Dex acknowledged sincerely. Despite their complicated history, he held no ill will toward Audrey's father, who had been manipulated during his vulnerable state. He asks about you occasionally, Vivian continued. Remembers you more clearly than many more recent acquaintances. Cognitive decline creates strange patterns of retention. Please convey my regards when appropriate. Vivian studied him over her teacup. You've managed the aftermath with remarkable discipline. The company thriving, Chloe adjusting well at university. Your own life reconfigured without visible disruption. Adaptation to changing parameters is a core competency, Dex replied, unconsciously echoing words he'd used with Chloe months earlier. Indeed, Vivian's smile held knowing amusement, though I suspect internal recalibration proves more challenging than external resolution. The observation echoed Dr. Morrison's perspective with surprising precision. All aspects are progressing appropriately. Dex responded neutrally. Of course, Vivian didn't press further. Audrey asked about you when we spoke last week. This was unexpected. Their divorce had been finalized months ago, with no direct communication between them since Audrey's departure for Connecticut. What specifically? Whether you seemed happy, whether you were seeing anyone. The typical inquiries of someone processing the end of a significant relationship. And your response? That you appear to be proceeding with your life in your characteristic, methodical fashion. Vivian set down her cup. She's seeing someone, apparently. A widowed professor at Yale. Very respectable, very safe. Dex absorbed this information with mild surprise at his own lack of reaction. 6 months ago, such news might have triggered complex responses. Now, it registered as simply another data point about a life that no longer intersected with his own. I wish her well, he said, finding the statement unexpectedly genuine. Do you? Vivian's gaze was penetrating. After everything that happened? Dex considered the question carefully. The resolution was proportionate and conclusive. Continuing animosity serves no practical purpose and consumes unnecessary resources. How pragmatic. Vivian's tone suggested both appreciation and amusement, though perhaps there's wisdom in that approach. Later that day, Dex met with Marius at Sentinel's headquarters to review expansion plans for their Asian operations. The company had secured several high-profile contracts in the region, necessitating significant infrastructure development. Singapore facility is ahead of schedule, Marius reported. Tokyo expansion requires additional regulatory clearances, but projections remain positive. And the personnel transfers? Team leaders confirmed for both locations. Support staff recruitment proceeding as planned. The operational details continued, precisely formatted and efficiently delivered. Sentinel had always functioned with military precision under Dex's leadership, but recent events had enhanced that discipline further. The betrayal had exposed vulnerabilities that had since been systematically addressed and eliminated. After concluding business matters, Marius shifted to a more personal topic. 6-month mark today, he noted. Standard protocol would suggest comprehensive assessment of resolution effectiveness. Dex recognized the reference to their shared operational background. In their previous work, major operations underwent formal review at specified intervals to evaluate outcomes and identify potential improvements. Assessment complete, Dex confirmed. Professional objectives achieved with 97% effectiveness rating. Collateral impacts contained within acceptable parameters. Long-term sustainability confirmed across all metrics. And the personal dimensions? The question came from Marius not just as a colleague, but as someone who understood the full context of recent events. One of the few people who recognized exactly what Dex had done and why. Recalibration ongoing, Dex acknowledged. Primary functionality maintained throughout transition period. Therapeutic intervention providing useful framework for processing. Marius nodded approval. Good. The dormancy transition requires proper management. Capabilities developed for specific contexts need appropriate recontainment. Noted and implemented. That evening, Dex met Chloe for dinner at her favorite restaurant near her university campus. Her freshman year was progressing well, academic performance exceptional despite the personal disruptions of recent months. She seemed more settled now, the initial shock and adjustment having evolved into a new equilibrium. Professor Harmon says my research methodology is graduate level already, she reported with justifiable pride. He's recommending me for the summer fellowship program. Excellent. The application deadline? Next month, but I'm already halfway through the proposal. She studied him across the table. How about you? How's the therapy going? The direct question was characteristic of their evolving relationship. More adult, more balanced than before. Continuing as scheduled. Dr. Morrison has useful perspectives. Translation. She makes you uncomfortable by asking questions you'd rather avoid, but you recognize the value anyway. Chloe smiled slightly. You're different, you know. Subtly, but definitely. Different how? More present. Before everything happened, you were physically there, but mentally elsewhere much of the time. Now, when we're together, you're fully engaged. She hesitated before adding, it's nice. The observation surprised him. He'd always considered himself attentive to Chloe, prioritizing their relationship despite professional demands. That she had perceived otherwise represented important feedback. A positive development from otherwise unfortunate circumstances, he acknowledged. I saw Mom last weekend, Chloe continued, watching for his reaction. Flew out to Connecticut for 2 days. How was that experience? Strange at first, but ultimately good. She's different too. Quieter, more reflective. Less focused on appearances and social positioning. Chloe traced patterns on the tablecloth absently. She asked about you, whether you seemed okay. Similar to her inquiry through Vivian, Dex noted. What was your response? That you're you, disciplined, focused, adaptable. But also that you laugh more now in some ways. That you seem more connected to the actual moment rather than constantly planning 3 steps ahead. The assessment was surprisingly perceptive. Dr. Morrison had noted similar shifts in their recent sessions, greater presence, increased engagement with immediate experience rather than constant strategic projection. She's genuinely sorry, you know, Chloe added carefully. Not just because things fell apart or because Terrence turned out to be using her, but because she hurt you, because she betrayed what you'd built together. Dex absorbed this information neutrally. Her regret is natural under the circumstances. Actions have consequences. Recognition of those consequences often triggers retrospective reassessment. Always so clinical. Chloe shook her head slightly. Have you forgiven her yet? Not for her sake, but for yours. The question mirrored one Dr. Morrison had posed repeatedly in their sessions. Forgiveness suggests emotional resolution. The practical matters have been resolved completely. The emotional components remain in progress. You do realize that's almost exactly what you said 6 months ago. Accurate observation. Some processes require extended timelines. Chloe studied him thoughtfully. Miranda came to campus last week. Gave a guest lecture on data intelligence in the private sector for my advanced information systems class. The information was unexpected. Miranda Reeves had completed her contractual obligations to Sentinel months ago, returning to her primary role at Parallax Analytics. An appropriate subject matter expert, Dex acknowledged. We had coffee afterward. She said something interesting, that people with certain backgrounds develop particular capabilities that serve specific contexts, but those same capabilities can become limitations in different environments if not properly managed. Dex recognized his own phrases reflected back to him, filtered through Miranda's perspective. A valid observation. She also said that you were better at the recontainment process than most, that you'd found effective methods for transitioning between operational and civilian contexts. Chloe hesitated before adding, but that recent events had required capabilities you'd kept dormant for years, and that recontaining those capabilities afterward presents unique challenges. The insight was remarkable for its accuracy. Miranda had indeed understood his situation with exceptional clarity, having experienced similar transitions herself. Her assessment is generally accurate, Dex confirmed, though the current situation involves variables beyond standard parameters. Because it was personal, Chloe nodded understanding. Because it wasn't just an operational challenge, but a betrayal by the people closest to you. Correct. That dimension introduces complexity beyond typical transition scenarios. Their conversation shifted to other topics through dinner, but as they walked back toward campus afterward, Chloe returned to more substantive matters. I'm proud of you, you know, she said unexpectedly. Not just for how you handled everything with Mom and Terrence, but for how you've managed yourself afterward. Most men would have either fallen apart completely or turned bitter and vengeful. You did neither. The statement affected Dex more deeply than he'd anticipated. I appreciate that assessment. It's not just an assessment, Dad. It's gratitude. She stopped walking and turned to face him directly. You protected me from the worst of it. made sure I wasn't collateral damage in their poor decisions or your response to them, gave me space to process everything without pressure to choose sides or abandon either parent. That was always the priority, Dex confirmed. Your well-being superseded all other considerations. I know, and that's what makes you different from both of them in the end. When everything fell apart, your first and consistent concern was protecting me. Not your pride, not your financial interests, not your social standing me. The simple truth of her observation resonated deeply. Throughout the planning and execution of his response to the betrayal, Chloe's well-being had indeed been the constant, non-negotiable priority. Every decision, every action had been filtered through that fundamental requirement. After saying goodnight to Chloe, Dex drove back to his new residence in the Hollywood Hills, a property selected for its security features and strategic positioning rather than status or size. The Bel Air mansion had been sold months earlier, too laden with memories and associations to serve as an appropriate base for rebuilding. As he entered the secure perimeter, he noted the subtle indicators that his systems were functioning optimally. The precise pattern of lighting, the barely perceptible hum of advanced security measures, the strategic positioning of surveillance equipment. The home reflected his priorities: functional, secure, efficient. Inside, he poured a single measure of bourbon and moved to the terrace overlooking the city lights. The evening was clear. The panorama of Los Angeles spread before him like a vast circuit board, patterns of light and movement, energy and purpose. His secure phone signaled an incoming message from an unexpected source. Miranda Reeves. Final verification protocol complete. All operational elements confirmed and active. Clean resolution across all platforms. Nathan Ford officially retired. The message confirmed what he already knew. The specialized capabilities activated for handling Terrence and Audrey's betrayal had been successfully recontained. The operational persona, cold, calculating, ruthlessly efficient, had been returned to dormancy. Dexter Northcutt, security entrepreneur and father, remained the active identity. He sent a simple acknowledgement, confirmed. Operational closure complete. Civilian parameters restored. Miranda's response came quickly. Personal status? The familiar question deserved honest assessment. Dex considered the past 6 months objectively, evaluating his adjustment to revised circumstances with the same precision he would apply to any operational analysis. Professionally, the transition had been comprehensive and effective. Sentinel Security had not merely survived the crisis, but thrived, expanding into new markets and securing prestigious contracts that had previously remained elusive. Personally, the adjustment continued along predicted trajectories. The house functioned efficiently. Daily routines provided necessary structure. Professional relationships remained productive and appropriately bounded. But Miranda wasn't asking about external metrics. Her question sought assessment of internal calibration, the emotional processing that Dr. Morrison emphasized in their sessions. Functional, he typed, then paused, considering whether additional context was warranted. After a moment, he continued, recalibration progressing, compartmentalization effective, but permeable when appropriate, moving forward rather than static. Her response came after a brief delay. Good. Forward movement is key. The rest follows eventually. Dex set down his phone and returned his attention to the city lights. 6 months ago, his world had collapsed and reformed around the betrayal of the two people he had trusted most. The operational response had been executed with precision and effectiveness. The aftermath had been managed with equal discipline. Yet something had shifted within him, subtle but fundamental. Dr. Morrison had identified it weeks earlier. You've stopped seeing personal relationships primarily as tactical considerations. That's significant progress. The observation had surprised him, though his response had been typically measured. Clarify parameters. Before, you approached relationships, even with Chloe, through strategic lens. What function do they serve? What objectives did they advance? Now you're beginning to experience them as inherently valuable, independent of operational utility. He hadn't immediately accepted her assessment, but subsequent reflection suggested accuracy. His weekly dinners with Chloe had evolved from scheduled commitments to anticipated engagements. Their conversations ranged more widely, with fewer calculated responses and more genuine exchanges. Even his quarterly meetings with Vivian had developed dimensions beyond mere strategic alliance. Their shared experience, both having been betrayed by people they trusted, created unexpected common ground. His secure phone signaled another incoming message, a notification from the monitoring system he maintained despite the official termination of active operations against Terrence Boyd. Subject: attempted unauthorized communication with restricted contact. Intervention successful. Communication blocked. Dex reviewed the attached details with clinical detachment. Terrence had attempted to send a letter to Audrey from prison, the fifth such attempt in 6 months. As with previous efforts, the communication had been intercepted and prevented from reaching its intended recipient. The systematic isolation of Terrence Boyd continued according to established parameters. His communications were monitored and controlled. His visitor list remained restricted to legal counsel only. His requests for transfers or special considerations were consistently denied through carefully cultivated influence with correctional authorities. Similarly, Audrey's isolation in Connecticut remained intact. Her social rehabilitation progressed slowly, her access to former networks limited by subtle intervention. Her financial resources, while adequate, remained tightly constrained through the mechanisms Dex had established during the divorce settlement. Some might view these continuing measures as excessive or vindictive. Dex considered them appropriate consequences for betrayal of trust. The operational phase had concluded, but certain parameters required ongoing maintenance to ensure complete resolution. He finished his bourbon and returned inside, securing the terrace doors with practiced efficiency. Tomorrow would bring the usual sequence of meetings, decisions, and strategic planning. Sentinel's Tokyo expansion required attention, as did the new security protocols being implemented across European operations. Life continued along recalibrated parameters. The betrayal had been addressed through proportionate response. The aftermath was being managed with appropriate discipline. The emotional components remained in progress, as Dr. Morrison regularly reminded him. But movement continued in the right direction, forward rather than static, adaptive rather than rigid. 3 days later, Dex sat in an unmarked vehicle outside the federal detention facility in Lompoc. The quarterly inspection of containment measures had become routine, a necessary verification that systems remained functioning as designed. Through high-powered optics, he observed Terrence Boyd in the prison yard, noting the physical changes 6 months of incarceration had produced. The once impeccable executive had grown gaunt, his movements suggesting persistent tension and wariness. Prison hierarchies were unforgiving to white-collar criminals, particularly those without external support networks. Dex's phone signaled an incoming call from Secure Line. Confirmation: Marius reported without preamble. Request for sentence reconsideration denied through appropriate channels. Appeal options effectively neutralized for minimum of 18 months. Acknowledged, Dex responded. Maintain established protocols. He had no interest in causing Terrence physical harm. That would be unnecessarily crude and potentially traceable. The true punishment was the systematic dismantling of hope. Each attempted communication blocked, each request for improved conditions denied, each appeal thwarted through invisible intervention. Isolation, constraint, and the slow realization that no pathway to redemption or recovery existed. These were proportionate consequences for betrayal of the magnitude Terrence had committed. Dex closed the observation file and instructed his driver to proceed to the airport. A board meeting in New York required his presence, followed by client consultations on the East Coast. The structured rhythm of professional obligations provided familiar framework amid continuing personal recalibration. As the vehicle merged onto the highway, his secure phone displayed an incoming message from Chloe. Got the summer fellowship. Celebrating dinner when you're back from New York? The simple notification triggered a response that would have surprised the Dexter Northcutt of 1 year earlier. Genuine pleasure unrelated to strategic advantage or operational success. His daughter's achievement represented value independent of its potential utility. "Congratulations," he replied. "Dinner at Giovanni's when I return Thursday." As Southern California receded behind him, Dex reviewed the past 6 months with analytical precision. The betrayal had forced recalibration across multiple domains: professional, personal, emotional. The process continued along generally positive trajectories, with periodic adjustments as necessary. One constant remained unchanged throughout. Consequences followed actions with mathematical certainty. Loyalty was rewarded. Betrayal met with proportionate response. Those who violated trust faced the full measure of accountability, delivered with methodical precision rather than emotional reaction. It was, after all, the natural order of things. 2 weeks later, Dex met with Miranda Reeves at a secure location in Marina del Rey. The converted boathouse served as an unofficial meeting point for matters requiring absolute discretion. Confirmation on the Connecticut situation, Miranda reported, sliding a thin file across the table. Subject remains effectively isolated from previous networks. Financial constraints functioning as designed. Social rehabilitation proceeding within established parameters. Dex reviewed the documentation with practiced efficiency. The surveillance was minimal now, periodic verification rather than active monitoring. Audrey's life in Connecticut continued along the trajectory he had established during their divorce settlement. Comfortable but constrained, secure but isolated from her former resources and connections. The new relationship? He inquired, referencing her involvement with the Yale professor. Progressing conventionally. Subject appears genuinely engaged. No indications of strategic motivation or hidden agenda. Maintain periodic verification, Dex instructed. Standard protocols. Miranda studied him with a perceptiveness that had made her exceptional in their shared operational past. The continuing surveillance. Is it necessary from a security perspective or serving other functions? The question was unexpected but legitimate. Verification of containment effectiveness, Dex replied. Standard protocol following major operational resolution. True, Miranda acknowledged. Though most operations don't involve monitoring an ex-spouse indefinitely. Most operations don't involve 20 years of shared history and access to sensitive information. Fair assessment. She gathered the documents, returning them to their secure case. The monitoring of Boyd continues as well. Regular verification of containment parameters. Nothing more. Miranda's expression suggested she recognized the partial truth in his response, but chose not to press further. Moving forward rather than static, she noted, echoing his earlier message. Correct. Forward momentum maintains operational effectiveness. After concluding the briefing, Dex drove to Malibu for his weekly dinner with Chloe. She had selected a beachfront restaurant they hadn't visited before, continuing her campaign to introduce variety into what she termed his excessively structured routines. "Dad," she greeted him with a quick hug. "How was the Tokyo trip?" "Productive. Facility expansion proceeding on schedule. Regulatory approvals secured for Phase 2 implementation." Translation: boring business stuff went according to your precisely calculated plan. She smiled to soften the teasing. "Any actual experiences while you were there? Things that weren't on the itinerary?" The question reflected ongoing efforts to encourage what Dr. Morrison termed present-moment engagement, experiencing environments rather than simply completing objectives within them. "I visited the Meiji Shrine," Dex acknowledged. "The architecture was impressive." "Wow, actual tourism? That's progress." Chloe's expression turned more serious. "I got another letter from Mom yesterday." Dex maintained neutral expression despite his internal reaction. "What did she communicate?" "She wants to visit California next month. Specifically asked if I thought it would be appropriate, given everything." Chloe watched him carefully. "She's concerned about potential awkwardness if you and she encountered each other." The scenario presented interesting variables. 6 months of structured distance had established effective boundaries and operational clarity. Direct interaction would introduce unpredictable elements. "Her concerns are logical," Dex acknowledged, "though unnecessary from my perspective. California is a large state with ample space for both of us to operate without intersection. So you wouldn't object? To her visiting, I mean, your relationship with your mother remains independent of other considerations. Her geographic location at any given time is irrelevant to established parameters. Chloe shook her head slightly. Always so clinical. But I'll take that as a no, I don't object. Their dinner continued with discussion of her fellowship plans and upcoming academic projects. Throughout the conversation, Dex noted subtle shifts in his own responses. Less calculation, more genuine engagement. The progress Dr. Morrison had identified continued along positive trajectories. Later that evening, as he drove back to his Hollywood Hills residence, Dex received an unexpected call from Vivian Ashcroft. "I've just had a rather interesting conversation with my daughter," she began without preamble. "She's planning a visit to California and seems concerned about potential awkwardness with you." Chloe mentioned the possibility. Dex confirmed. "I expressed no objection." "Magnanimous," Vivian noted, a hint of amusement in her tone. "Though I suspect Audrey's concern runs deeper than mere geographical proximity. She mentioned possibly meeting with you directly, a conversation for proper closure, as she described it. The suggestion introduced new variables. Direct interaction had not been part of Dex's operational parameters for the post-resolution phase. "Is that something you might consider?" Vivian pressed when he remained silent. For closure, as she puts it, Dex considered the proposal with analytical precision. What would be the strategic objective of such an engagement? "Perhaps not everything requires strategic objectives, Dexter." Vivian's tone suggested both amusement and exasperation. Sometimes human interaction serves emotional rather than tactical purposes. Emotional engagement without defined objectives introduces unnecessary variables and potential complications. "Yes, that's precisely how most people approach conversations with former spouses," Vivian remarked dryly. "I'll convey your enthusiasm to Audrey." After concluding the call, Dex continued his drive, mind processing the unexpected development. Direct interaction with Audrey hadn't been part of his projected scenarios for the current phase. The potential meeting presented both risks and potential benefits from an operational perspective. Dr. Morrison would likely suggest it represented an opportunity for emotional processing rather than strategic calculation. Their recent sessions had focused increasingly on that distinction, the difference between managing external variables and addressing internal responses. As he entered his residence and activated security protocols, Dex's secure phone signaled another incoming message, this time from an automated monitoring system tied to federal correctional databases. Subject Boyd, Terrence J. Medical incident reported 1,643 hours. Subject transferred to facility medical wing. Condition listed as stable. The notification triggered immediate tactical assessment. Medical incidents within federal facilities could create unexpected variables, transfers to external facilities, changes in security protocols, modifications to established containment parameters. Dex initiated standard verification procedures, contacting assets within the correctional system for accurate assessment. The response came within 30 minutes. Minor incident, no external transfer required, no change to established security protocols. Containment remained effective. Variables controlled. Resolution maintained. As he prepared for sleep that night, Dex reflected on the day's developments with characteristic precision. The potential meeting with Audrey represented an unexpected variable in otherwise stable parameters. The medical incident with Terrence required standard monitoring, but no immediate intervention. Overall status remained positive. Professional operations proceeding effectively, personal recalibration progressing along anticipated trajectories, containment of adverse elements maintained within established parameters. Forward momentum rather than static positioning. As Miranda had noted, the rest would follow eventually. 3 weeks later, Dex sat in a discreet corner of the Huntington Gardens Japanese Pavilion, the location selected for its neutral territory and strategic advantages. The meeting with Audrey had been arranged through Vivian as intermediary, with clear parameters established in advance. 60 minutes maximum, public location, no discussion of ongoing legal matters. He observed her approach from 50 meters away, noting the changes 6 months had wrought. Audrey moved differently now, less performative elegance, more natural confidence. Her clothing was stylish but understated, lacking the calculated ostentation that had characterized her wardrobe during their later years together. "Dexter," she greeted him, settling onto the bench with careful distance maintained between them. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Parameters were acceptable, he acknowledged neutrally. "What did you wish to discuss?" Audrey's smile held a hint of remembered familiarity. Still direct as ever. "Some things don't change, I suppose." "Many things don't change. Core operational characteristics typically remain consistent despite contextual shifts." "And others do," she observed quietly. "You seem different somehow, more present." The observation echoed Chloe's assessment from months earlier. "Adaptation to revised circumstances requires certain adjustments," Dex acknowledged. Audrey studied him for a moment before continuing. "I didn't come to discuss philosophy or personal growth. I came to say something that needs to be said directly, not through intermediaries or legal representatives." "Proceed." "I'm sorry." The simple statement carried evident sincerity, not just for how things ended, but for the betrayal itself. "For violating the trust you placed in me. For conspiring with Terrence against everything we'd built together." Dex absorbed the apology with analytical precision, assessing its components against known behavioral patterns. "Acknowledged." "That's it." "Acknowledged?" A flash of the old Audrey surfaced briefly before she controlled her reaction. "I suppose I expected nothing different." "What response would be appropriate under these circumstances?" Dex inquired, genuinely curious about her expectations. "Forgiveness is generally considered the social convention, but would lack sincerity in this context." "At least you're honest about that." Audrey's laugh held no humor. "No, I didn't expect forgiveness. I know you too well for that. Or at least I thought I did." "Clarify." "The man I believed I knew for 20 years wouldn't have been capable of what you did." She met his gaze directly. "The systematic dismantling of Terrence's life. The clinical precision with which you extracted me from our shared existence. The invisible but absolute control you've maintained over both our situations since." Dex considered her assessment. "You had incomplete information regarding certain capabilities. That created inaccurate baseline assumptions." "That's one way of putting it." Audrey shook her head slightly. "My mother warned me, before we were married. She said there was something underneath the disciplined exterior, something few people ever saw, but that emerged when necessary." "Vivian has always been perceptive," Dex acknowledged. "She also said something interesting recently, that she'd been wrong about you in fundamental ways. That she'd focused on what she considered your limitations rather than recognizing your true capabilities." Audrey studied him thoughtfully. "She actually respects you now. That might be the most surprising outcome of this entire situation." The observation aligned with Dex's own assessment of his evolving relationship with his former mother-in-law. Their quarterly meetings had developed dimensions beyond mere strategic alliance. "Our interaction has found productive parameters," he confirmed. "And Chloe?" Audrey's expression softened at the mention of their daughter. "She seems, thriving, even despite everything that happened. Her well-being has been the consistent priority throughout all operational phases." "I know." Audrey's acknowledgement carried genuine gratitude. "Whatever else happened between us, you've been an excellent father. You protected her from the worst of it, from what Terrence and I did, and from the consequences that followed." The conversation continued for the remaining allocated time, covering neutral topics with surprisingly comfortable engagement. As their meeting concluded, Audrey addressed the underlying question directly. "Will you ever forgive me, Dexter? Not for my sake, but for yours." The question mirrored those posed by both Chloe and Dr. Morrison in recent months. Dex considered it with characteristic thoroughness before responding. Forgiveness suggests emotional resolution and renewed trust. The first remains in progress. The second is permanently foreclosed. His tone held no anger, simply factual assessment. "However," Continuing animosity serves no operational purpose. Moving forward requires energy directed toward productive objectives rather than maintained resentment. That's probably the closest thing to forgiveness you're capable of offering, Audrey noted, a sad smile crossing her features. I'll accept it for what it is. As she departed, Dex remained seated, watching her figure recede along the garden path. The meeting had proceeded within established parameters, providing useful data points regarding current status and potential future interactions. Dr. Morrison would undoubtedly have multiple observations regarding the exchange during their next session. Her perspective on emotional processing versus operational assessment had proved increasingly valuable during recent months. His secure phone signaled an incoming message from Marius. Tokyo implementation phase 3 approved by regulatory authorities. Singapore expansion exceeding projected metrics. Quarterly board review scheduled for confirmation. The professional updates provided familiar structure amid the less predictable personal recalibration process. Sentinel Security continued its upward trajectory, expanding into new markets with characteristic precision and effectiveness. Later that evening, Dex received an unexpected video call from Chloe. "So," she asked without preamble when he connected, "how was the Great Summit meeting?" "Productive within established parameters," he replied, noting her eye roll at his typical phrasing. Translation: "You were civil, but didn't suddenly become best friends." Chloe's expression grew more serious. "Was it difficult? Seeing her again after everything?" Dex considered the question carefully. "Less difficult than anticipated. Contextual shifts have created sufficient distance for effective interaction without unnecessary emotional complications." "Wow, you're practically gushing with sentiment," Chloe teased before adding more seriously. "But that's actually good to hear. Progress, right?" "Forward momentum rather than static positioning," Dex confirmed, unconsciously echoing his exchange with Miranda. Their conversation shifted to her fellowship projects and upcoming visit home, comfortable patterns that had developed over recent months. As they concluded the call, Chloe offered a final observation. "You know what Dr. Morrison would say, right? That meeting Mom without having an emotional meltdown or returning to cold operational mode represents significant progress in your processing." "Your assessment is likely accurate," Dex acknowledged, though the terminology would differ somewhat. "Always so precise," Chloe smiled. "See you next weekend, Dad." After ending the call, Dex moved to his secure workstation to review the day's operational updates. The monitoring systems maintained on both Terrence and Audrey showed no anomalies or concerns. Containment parameters remained effective, variables controlled within established boundaries. The professional empire he had built continued its expansion, growing stronger and more resilient following the crisis. The personal recalibration progressed along generally positive trajectories, with periodic adjustments as necessary. One fundamental principle remained unchanged throughout. Consequences followed actions with mathematical certainty. Those who maintained loyalty received proportionate reward. Those who betrayed trust faced appropriate response. It was, after all, the natural order of things, a principle Dexter Northcutt had lived by throughout his existence, from classified operations in unacknowledged locations to the executive suite of a global security enterprise. The methods might evolve, the context might shift, but the core operational parameters remain consistent. Trust once broken remained irreparable. Betrayal once committed received proportionate response. These weren't emotional reactions, but operational constants, the foundation upon which all other parameters were built. Forward rather than static, adaptive rather than rigid, but unwavering in fundamental principles. As Dex closed the final monitoring report and secured his systems for the night, he allowed himself a moment of rare reflection. The past 6 months had required capabilities long kept dormant, forced recalibration across multiple domains, and created new parameters for moving forward. Throughout the process, one truth had remained constant. He was exactly who he had always been, disciplined, methodical, and absolutely unforgiving of betrayal. Some things, after all, never changed. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.